Hi there and welcome to the Ankara Book Club. My name is Heather. Thank you for being here. And if at any point you love what you hear or see, or you're resonating with any of the information, we'd really like to know about it. Like the video if it resonates, comment below. We'd love to hear from you. And subscribe to the channel just if you want to be in touch with things that come out just as they come out, notifications. That really votes for the content that we're making. So we feel really good about making more. And it's totally fine if you don't resonate, but you're interested in the conversations that are here anyway. So I'd love to hear from you either way. I wanted to review a book today that I found a long time ago, but I never had my own copy for quite a while. And I found this at a little market down in Melbourne actually one day. And I knew that it was time to just have it on my shelf, not knowing who might need it or when the time would come. But it's a book that I often reference and a book that I would be delighted to give a friend or a friend's daughter, particularly at quite a young age. So this book, I know there'd be many updated versions and there'd be many people doing something similar, but one of the classics that I think every woman really needs to read is Natural Fertility. And when I look back now, I'm actually so surprised that we don't learn this information when we're young. And I went to school with a lot of girls and a lot of women. And if most of them would have known this information, not only would we have a better relationship to our bodies and our cycles, but we could actually understand the science behind the biggest change, of course, in our timelines that will ever happen, and that's motherhood. Now, here we are, and I'm not sure about everybody overseas. Please chime in and let me know what's happening in America and in other nations. But here in Australia, we are facing rising infertility rates. And I know the science says it's because parents are getting older. And I have worked with many clients around their fertility over the years. And to me, there's a considerable lack of knowledge until something goes wrong. And by the time we get into our 30s and our 40s, our body has really been yearning for us to understand how divine and how beautiful and how wise those cycles are. Natural fertility is your textbook on how to know your body. It really pulls in that there's a method that you can use that is fairly accurate, very accurate actually, for you understanding when you're fertile and when you're not. So as I said before, most women I notice are greatly enraged or inconvenienced by their periods very early on. Some fall pregnant simply out of a lack of knowledge and understanding how that process happens and how much it will change their lives forever. And then when they get to the place that they feel all the conditions are right, then they face challenges. But if we knew how synced our bodies were with our emotional lives, with the moon and the deep science of it, so that we could have ownership over our bodies, this is the way that we get there. If you have a daughter and she is 11 plus, you probably want to sit down and read this book yourself if you don't know that information and empower and educate her around her cycle. It's not an inconvenient thing that happens every month that you need to have all these things ready to go and eat chocolate at all. It's actually your body's indication of how much stress and how much it's gauging the situation around you as fertile soils for what is part of our capacity in this lifetime. So we need to know how conception happens, why it happens then, what are the risks, what are the things we can be aware of, because a woman that knows her body is so powerful. And your body starts to tell you about the partners that you choose, about the sexual contact that you have, about the moon cycles and your levels of stress. It's all there in menstruation. And particularly because I work with clients a little bit later on, and they always express this regret around, I really wish I knew this earlier. And I think, yeah, I wish we did too. It should be taught in school curriculums so that women can have a choice over their bodies. And they're not just at the whim of the conditioning of the generation before them. So pregnancy isn't something that just mysteriously happens. It's actually fairly complex once it does happen. And preparation and being awareness of those beautiful cycles, and actually when you're fertile, and what relates to that is knowledge that all women should have. And frankly, men could too. The conversation with younger people is usually just around contraception, isn't it? It's really just, how do I block something that might happen? How do I put that into something else's hands? A lot of people have heard me talk about the contraceptive pill before, and I think it's incredibly risky and damaging for women's bodies. And it is an empowering choice, and it has allowed for some women to have a period of time where they feel safe to just make their own decisions and live their own life. But where is the power and the ownership in fully understanding what that pharmaceutical drug is doing? 20 years later, 10 years later, sometimes even 2 years later, it can put you in great risk of both infertility and disease. So I've had many friends that have learnt that the hard way, and it does take its toll. But really what the body is asking for is for its divine wisdom to be known and the way that it works to be known. So if every young woman knew exactly when she was going to be fertile and could track the signs of that, we would have a completely different experience. And if she could protect her sense of fertility and know that contraception is an option and it's a responsibility of both partners, and this sort of information also lends to constructive and empowering conversations around consent and who's going to take the responsibility of what could happen to both of us. We are still in a paradigm where a child is more, if it is seen as a burden, not a blessing. And look, it's usually both at once, sometimes the most beautiful parts of our life, but others can be very detrimental to a woman that's not ready to carry that responsibility for the rest of her life. And if we just knew, I know there's a lot of it in spirit's hands, in God's hands for sure. And it has to do with the chemistry between two people and souls wanting to come through. But this gives us an empowering scientific perspective of what actually happens and how we can be in charge of that. This has now been turned into apps and methods. There is a natural fertility method that doesn't involve forcing the body to do something that it's not naturally wanting to do. As the contraceptive pill puts us into an early pregnancy phase, which is very difficult emotionally and physical for a lot of women. And it takes its toll because it's overriding the natural cycle of things, the natural cycle of our body. And the most beautiful part about this information is if we can understand the natural cycles, right? That we ebb and flow with energy and receptivity and that extrovert nature for the world. When we're in peak fertile times, we know what to expect. We know how we're engaged and we can connect with people and who we might be attracted to. And then we go into all these other phases that represent us shedding and letting go and coming back into ourselves. It is the divine power of the feminine. It is the beautiful blessing of what it is to be a woman and how connected we are to the earth and the moon at all times. But modern interventions really speak of this story of forcing the body to be more masculine, which is to just have this layer of energy on top of everything that doesn't fluctuate. And I love that women can have power over their bodies and say, I want to have a child when I want to have a child, and I want that to be in a certain way. But if we need to override the hormones to do so, we're still overriding the wisdom of the body. And if there's dysfunction in the menstrual cycle and the hormones from a young age, we can be looking at, well, what part of the femininity has been damaged? What part is lying in shame? And where is the knowledge that we need to empower that woman so she can make her own choices according to what her body is saying to her? Usually as adults, when we go through something like infertility or difficult conceiving, or when someone desperately wants a child and two bodies aren't cooperating, then we go through that shame portal and that damage then, which says, well, if we'd made different decisions in our youth based on what we have and what our bodies are like, we could have prevented that sense of frustration. And look, all happens in divine timing, but I think we're actually ready for this. This is a book that was written a long time ago, but it's still super valid, and will always remain on my shelf to remind me and also to be there when I'm interested in how my body is working. If I'm interested in changes in my menstruation and I want to understand if my fertility is there or not. And the other thing, and the last thing I'll say about this book is, fertility is so much more than just having children. Fertility is about a woman's body being divinely connected to the elements and to her natural self and to the earth and to the environment that codes her for the right conditions for fertility to happen. And if we're aware of that, we can track when that falls away. A lot of women would get here when they get to menopause, and menopause is difficult as well. But if we knew this early on, before menstruation came in and we passed it down, we could actually empower women and young women to be in charge of their bodies and to be receptive to it, rather than force it to do things that it doesn't want to do and is not naturally inclined to do. So fertility is about our connection with our environment, to the moon, to ourselves, to our diet, to the people around us, to our nourishment. It's all divinely connected. And wouldn't it be lovely if those beautiful connections were then brought in from empowered, knowledgeable mothers that said, it's time, I can tell, because the conditions are right. My body is responding well to this person, and I am ready for the huge, beautiful, divine feminine upgrade that is about to happen, and also receptive to a body that might tell me otherwise. So if you see it and you crave this information, or you just like to brush up on your skills, or you know someone that needs this, hand it out to young women, to your daughters, to your friends' daughters, to your cousins, to your nieces, whatever it is. It's up to them to read it, but at least put the information in front of them before they have to learn the hard way. And let's empower women around their bodies and around their menstrual cycle, and know that fertility is in their hands and they don't have to override it with really harsh pharmaceuticals that have big side effects, and they don't have to leave that responsibility to a partner that may or not be around for the long haul. So that's my take on natural fertility. Still an incredible book that I think has brought so much medicine to the world. I hope you can grab a copy and circulate it around. So much love. I'll see you soon. Bye.